think something should work. Ah, there we go. There's people.
There we go. What's up, Tony? Jeff in Vegas.
How are you? What's happening? What's happening?
I'm glad we could get this scheduled around and get it right today. I was eager to talk to you.
Likewise, great. And you got blue. Yay, on the background. This is great.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I got to do it up right. Well, congratulations on your book, How the Boogeyman Became a Poet. This
Thank you.
book is
Thank you very much.
your personal story, man. So, what challenges did you experience writing your story? What adversities did you come over? Because it's a laundry list, isn't it?
It's a lot going on in this book. That is true. And so what I've been sharing is, what I realize is when it comes to how the boogeyman became a poet, it's vulnerability is the first thing that I always express. It's, in this book, I provide photographed hard copies of the poems I used to write to myself as a kid. Things that no one has ever seen before besides me and myself when I wrote to myself at night, right? And so there's some vulnerability in terms of like exposing the world to the things that I wrote just to kind of protect myself and to make sense of sadness and fear and anger and depression, just making sense of the poems. So there's vulnerability there in just writing the thing and giving it to the world. But then also some freedom there is what I would say too, right? I'm so glad to have gotten this out of my system, but also to put in the hands of readers who hopefully can also identify kind of with things that they've been scared of about their own selves too, right? So yeah.
And you could have chose long story, short story, but you chose poetry. So, how did that become part of your life growing up?
Oh wow. Poetry, I would say, found me in third grade is the way I would describe that. I had a teacher in third grade who we wrote it was like a poetry contest for our class, and I think I won or some poem I wrote called Seasons in third grade. And I put this in the book, and it's like all the leaves on the ground, red, yellow, green, and brown, something like really silly. And my teacher loved it so much that she stapled it to like the bulletin board of the classroom, which as a kid was a big deal. And then I was asked to MC an event for our principal. So I had become a poet and a mover of the crowds early on. And so folks, I've always been invested in that, but wasn't until I became like an adolescent, like puberty years, teenagers, when I began to start writing poetry to myself, like things that I needed to just wrestle with on my own. Those poems showed up in here. And this book is all about how I got into college as a first generation college student, how I came out to college or started coming out the closet as gay, and how I discovered poetry is like my pathway to do that. And so all that's unpacked.
Yeah, nice. And they always say as an author, write what you know. So, teenagers in education, because you wrote for young adults, didn't you?
I did. I did. I wrote for young adults because I wanted to have something that I didn't have as a kid that I think that would have been just a wonderful one, just a fun read. This is written in verse on purpose, right? Meaning there's rhyming, there's alliteration, there's metaphor, there's imagery. It's a fun read. It's also available in the audiobook, and I self-narrated it. So y'all gotta hear this.
I hope you have more energy on the audiobook than you do right now. Okay.
Impossible. And so I don't even know what the question was, but yeah, so there was writing those poems in there about that story. Really, it mattered to me. And I knew I wanted young readers to be able to pick up something that they could identify with, even in the language, but also adult readers too, right? I used to teach an English language arts class to adult learners in Washington, D.C., where I'm at right now, at a public charter high school. These are adults who are working on their high school certificates, GEDs, those sorts of things. And I had them reading excerpts from How the Boogeyman Became a Poet, and they loved it. My oldest student was 65 years old and she couldn't get enough. And so my point is, I think there's something about putting a story written in a cool way on the page for all kind of learners and readers.
Well, I wonder, how did you become the boogeyman? Was that a nickname growing up, or you don't seem like a boogeyman to me?
That's another really good question. The title of this book actually came from the very last line in a poem that I wrote over a decade ago. A buddy of mine called me just having a bad day, and I was offering some advice. And we got off the phone. I just kind of felt his heaviness. And just like as a kid, I have to like kind of write my emotions out. And I wrote this poem about just, recognizing how great you are. It's actually the epilogue in this book. So what happens is, I believe that just about everything I write is for me first. And so for some reason in that poem that I was writing about thinking about my friend, the very last line said, and so the boogeyman became a poet. And so when it came down to writing this book and coming up with a title, I treated it almost like an academic essay. I'm a PhD person, and so I know how to write research. And I was like, what if I wrote this book? How did the boogeyman become a poet? Tony, how did you become so unafraid of being who you are? Because you had that problem as a kid. And so being able to put together this book, writing it that way, and even like supplying the poems and the pictures as like evidence, just like a student would like put evidence in their research paper, but it's writing to answer that question. And so, yeah,
And since you had all these hardships growing up, and now the next generation will read your book, do
yeah.
you feel that if you just reach one kid or one adult, it's all worth it?
Absolutely. It's very much that. I think it's like the starfish theory, right? Or something, just sort of like, and I firmly believe that as a spoken word artist and a poet, I've been to places where I've just performed poems for like two people who showed up for something. And I would be like, you know what? You are the two people who are supposed to be here. Right. And so what I'm really glad about is like, if anything, there's one person who needs to read this book. Although I'm now learning there's a lot more people in the world who not only need to read, but really want to. But yeah, it does matter. Like for people to feel affirmed and to know that they matter, whether, the boogeyman represents, for me, the boogeyman represented internalized racism, internalized homophobia. I grew up poor, so internalizing kind of a poverty mindset. So I was afraid to be me. Now, people might have different kind of boogie people. It might be afraid to, who knows, I don't know, jump out of a plane. I don't know. You know what I mean? But like deal with your own boogie people. Yeah.
And I love how you use education also to get out of those situations too, because I'm a big advocate of education too.
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes. Absolutely.
now,
Absolutely.
now with this new book, I mean, you scream, you need to be like on tour. So is there a book tour? Is there a poetry readings that you can be? I mean,
Yes, there's all kinds of things happening. And so what I love is my worlds have collided in such a way where I have been since 2019. I got laid off from a full-time nonprofit youth development job and have been a writer and a poet and an educator sort of out of the classroom for the last 5 years on my own. And so I'm always sort of at schools doing writing workshops and teaching about hip hop history and culture and doing some fun stuff. But now that I have the book, it's sort of like, oh, well, kind of the work that I've been doing while traveling to these different places is now aligned with this book that also needs to travel places. And so they've aligned. Right. And so now there's this book tour. But yeah, I'll be at a high school tomorrow in DC. I'll be at in Cincinnati, Ohio next week, and South by Southwest EDU in Austin. And I'm going to Houston, and I'll be in San Jose, California, but
whew,
everywhere.
you're
Yeah.
busy.
Yes, booked and busy. We're calling it the Booked and Busy Tour.
I love it. I
Book
love it.
being BOOK, of course,
Of
with
course.
ED in the parentheses.
Tony, man, I love your energy. Congratulations on the book. I
Thank you,
think
my
once you
friend.
switch the decaf, you'll really do well. Yeah.
And the sad part is, this is me all the time. This
I
is
know. I say, you know what? But that's awesome. That's what makes you you, and I love your passion. It's infectious. It really is.
Thank you so, so very much.
So
Thank you.
thanks for talking to me today, and let's talk again soon. And come to Vegas soon. We'd love to have you. Come visit.
I would love to. Matter of fact, I might come this year. You might be surprised.
Hey, we have the fifth largest school district in the country, so you got to get down here.
Say less.
Thanks so much, Tony. Take care.
Thanks so much. Peace.